Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of The Indie Gamer, a podcast dedicated to indie games and the people who love indie games. I'm your host, Lizzy Jorgensen,
And I'm Jonah Holland.
and we are so excited to have you here today to listen to us talk a little bit about the unfinished Swan. But before we get into all of that, like we said before, my name is Lizzy Jorgensen. I am a graphic designer, and I more recently just got into playing video games. So in high school, I watched a lot of people playing video games, but I never really played myself, PC or console. My brother did have an Xbox 360, and I did dabble in a little bit of Minecraft. I feel like everyone had a Wii back in the day, so I have played Wii games a good bit, but other than that, never really a serious console game. But more recently, since dating Jonah, I've gotten into playing a lot more games, and I would consider myself a sort of a mid-tier experienced gamer at this point. Jonah, if you want to give a little bit of background of your own.
Absolutely, yeah. So again, I'm Jonah Holland. I'm a photographer who has been playing video games pretty much my whole life. Play a little bit of everything from indie to AAA, but started off back in the day with my older siblings N64, that kind of stuff, Pokemon Snap. Hence why I'm a photographer now. But that's a story for another podcast. Yeah, just grew up with a passion for games, and it's something that I've been really grateful that I've been able to pass on to Lizzy and share it with her.
Yeah, Unfinished Swan is a very important game for us, as you'll see we get into further into the podcast. But before we dive right into what we think about the Unfinished Swan, let's talk about what the Unfinished Swan is.
What is the Unfinished Swan, Lizzy?
Well, Jonah, have I got some information for you? So, The Unfinished Swan is a first person adventure video game co developed by Giant Sparrow and Santa Monica Studios for the PlayStation 3. It was released in October of 2012 through the PlayStation Network. It is a PlayStation exclusive. Ooh. Throughout the course of the game, you play as a young boy named Monroe who is chasing after a swan who has wandered off into a surreal, unfinished kingdom. The game has a delightful art style. It was developed with the concept of creating an interactive children's book, and the game definitely succeeds in that, I would say. It is personally significant because it is the first big girl console game that I ever played. So, Jonah, actually, when we first started dating, he was very cautious about introducing me into video games because I guess he didn't want me to think that he was too much of a nerd. But we've been dating for 2 years now, so that's just right out the window. Like, who cares at this point? But, he personally chose that the Unfinished Swan for me to play as my first game. So just thinking about that, I'm very curious. Why did you choose the Unfinished Swan for me to play?
Yeah, so with picking Unfinished Swan to be like the first game that I had you play and like us experience together, granted it was my second time going through the game, it stood out to me a lot, not as necessarily as like a ploy to try and get you to start playing
Yeah.
games or that kind of thing. I genuinely thought you would be interested in just some of the artistic elements of it. You as someone who studies and appreciates art, I thought that you would enjoy it. That as well as the really endearing plot of the game. I, in a way, just wanted to see how you experienced just the joys of discovering things in the game. Just for instance, the game starts out with just a pure white screen. You got to figure out what button to press to shoot that first ball of ink. And I remember watching your reaction just as the first ink shot and it splashes on the wall and you start to figure out really what the game is. It was just a really awesome thing to get to watch you experience. And that's kind of what drew me to it, with it being your first game, so to speak.
Yeah, all good reasons to get me to play a game. And you definitely were right. I enjoyed it, especially that first level, that excitement of figuring out that I was pressing the correct button. Mind blown. And sort of just throwing those little balls of black ink in the first level to reveal the world around you is it was very engaging. It blew my mind that games weren't just like big like shooting campaigns or like your team against their team like shooting people down, because that was pretty much the impression that I had of most video games. It was very cool to see that there was a little bit more of a creative element in independent games like Unfinished Swan. So
Yeah, 'cause I mean, a big part of that even was the few games you had seen me play. We started dating right after the release of Modern Warfare 2019, so that's all I was playing in my free time.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that probably enforced the idea in my head that most games were just big shooters. But much to my glee, they were not. But it was very surprising to me seeing you playing Modern Warfare and knowing that you were not only a big fan of shooters, you're also very, very good at them. It was a big surprise to hear that you had played this like little delightful interactive children's storybook indie game. What initially drew you to this game?
So with Unfinished Swan, I even remember like being a kid, like in my preteen years, religiously reading PlayStation blog articles. Pretty much whenever anything was announced, with it being a PlayStation exclusive, there was a lot of coverage back then. I remember just finding the concept of it really interesting. Because in the original marketing material, they really only showed footage of that first area, which is the pure black and white ink splashes and all that. I thought it looked really cool, and I wanted it, but never really thought about it again until 2015. It became free for PlayStation Plus 1 month, and I was completely sold. Very fond memories of actually playing through it when it was free, and enjoying that whole experience with my niece, just the discovery of it and kind of experiencing the really gut-wrenching plot with my niece.
Gut-wrenching plot.
It was special. It was really special.
For our listeners and viewers who may not know the just baseline plot of The Unfinished Swan, you're playing as a young boy, Monroe, who's chasing a swan throughout these landscapes. But Monroe's mother has recently died. She was an artist who left behind 300 unfinished paintings. And in his transition to the orphanage, Monroe can only take one painting with him, and he chooses his favorite, which is the Unfinished Swan. And shenanigans ensue. You get to the end. It's very endearing, very lovely story. But we are not in the business of spoilers here, so if you want to know how it ends, look it up on IGN or go play the game. Please go play the game. Just going back to like that first moment of like throwing that black ink in the white room, would you say that's your favorite moment from the game?
Honestly, yeah, I feel like that's always been the most standout moment for me. It's just like the little spark of magic in that first throw. Absolutely.
Definitely. I would say that my favorite is probably there is one level where you are throwing water to make vines grow in order to navigate the terrain. And again, you have to figure out which button to push to make the vines grow, to throw the water, and just that surprise and shock of figuring out, like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do. Because I genuinely thought it was blue paint at first.
I did too, yeah.
It is not blue paint, folks. You have heard it here first. But that was very surprising and very exciting to me as a player.
Absolutely. I feel like there are just so many little moments in the game. I mean, without giving away anything big, just so many little moments of just like wonder and discovery, as each chapter of the game has kind of its own little twist on the gameplay, as well as the way it presents the world around the player. It's really a special little game.
It is very special, and it's very novice gamer friendly. I know that playing a game on a big console with a big controller was a little bit daunting to me, but the controls were very easy to get a grasp on. The only thing that was a little bit intimidating is there is a level where you are not being chased, but there is a potential for like you to have to restart the level from the beginning, and there are some enemies that you have to run away from. But that was the only thing I remember being intimidating enough for me to sort of second guess playing it, but made it through that level. It was so easy, actually, especially going back 2 years after I first played it. Like I said, I consider myself more of a middle tier gamer now, not as much of a greenhorn, but yeah, revisiting the game now, it's a lot different. It's a lot different. What was it like playing through the second time, watching me do it?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of just like being a viewer for the second time, when you actually have it in your hands the second time, it might feel a little slower, a little sluggish, just because you don't have that same sense of discovery going through it. And then, of course, already knowing how to solve the light puzzles, it might feel a little more slow. But as the viewer, the second time, I didn't really run into any of those issues because it was less about re-experiencing the plot in the world and more about experiencing you going through it and trying to just share that with you.
Yeah. Yeah. That definitely makes sense because as playing it, I played the game, replayed the game before recording the podcast, and not watching someone I love playing it, it made it a little bit more of a drag to go through because it was sort of, I already figured out everything. I already knew everything that was going to happen. And because it's so simple, it's still very lovely. If you haven't played this game, please go play The Unfinished Swan.
Absolutely.
But second time through, I don't know. I don't think I need a third playthrough. I think I'd rather just let my memories lie. It's like how Lunchables in second grade were amazing, but if you ate it now, it would kind of be a little bit disappointing and sad.
Yeah, I mean that's fair, but don't let that sway you away
Very
from
true.
wanting to experience it for the first time. Highly recommended. If you can catch it on a good sale, it is a wonderful time, and it is on PS4 and PC now as well.
Yeah. So let's wrap it all up with a pretty bow. We are gonna rate The Unfinished Swan from 1 to 10. 1 being worst game ever, would never play it again. Gonna tell everyone that I know to not play it. And 10 being best game ever. I love this game so much. I have proposed to this game and we are getting married next month. Here is the link to our registry. So, Jonah, how would you rate Giant Sparrows, The Unfinished Swan?
Well, I did love the game, but I think I would have some commitment issues with a 10 under that description. But for me, I think I would have to give it a firm 7.5 balloons out of 10.
Very nice.
Yeah, for me, it is one of those standout indie games for me. And granted, this is mostly rose-tinted glasses looking back at it.
Very true.
I feel like completely discounting a second playthrough, first playthrough only, it is just such a wonderful delight of a little indie game. I would consider it a must play out of the like PlayStation published indie games. It just really is a delight. Yeah,
Yeah.
7.5.
Very nice.
What would you rank it, my friend?
So, my friend. So, for The Unfinished Swan, I share a lot of the same sentiments as you do. I look at this game very lovingly because it was my first big girl game. And even though in the second playthrough it wasn't quite as wonderful as I remembered it, I still look back at that first time playing it and feeling like video games were something that I could really get into, that it was something that it could be for me too. It didn't just have to be for all of these gamer dudes with their 55 different guns playing Call of Duty. That there could be small little games for a person who likes small little pretty things. So I am going to give The Unfinished Swan a 7 out of 10. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely on the higher scale, just as well as I was.
Yeah, I think it deserves that. I think it succeeds at everything that it sets out to do. And it's just a lovely little game.
Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. Any other notes that you have on the game?
I think that is it for The Unfinished Swan. That's it for our first episode. If y'all would like to hear more podcasts, there are more episodes of the Indie Gamer to come in the future. Stick around for next week. We will be talking about Going Under, one of our mutual loves of gaming. So that is it for the Indie Gamer this week. We've enjoyed having you. Please tune in next week and hope you have a good one. Bye.